The Victis crew. Somehow one of the most hated yet one of the most loved zombies groups in all of COD Zombies. If you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm of course referring to the group of characters who are featured in Transit, Die Rise, Buried, and the most recent map which served as the official ending to the story, Dr. Toten. This group of characters are comprised of Cowgirl Misty, obsessed science nerd Martin, scummy yet fascinating Stillinger, and amnesiatic Russman. These four characters served as a replacement group after Ultimus, the main four we know and love, made their final appearance for a while on Moon. Now, the general reception to these cast of characters initially was not good, to put it mildly. Almost everyone I've known or seen don't really like these guys and only tolerate Misty for mature reasons. However, everyone seems to have warmed up to these guys, including me. So you may be asking, why am I making a video critiquing these guys in their story when I don't mind them? That's a fair question, and to that I say I don't hate or even dislike these characters. However, the whole point of this video essay is to point out their missed potential as a generally complex and interesting COD Zombies cast. So with that said, let's start. So it's pretty obvious that until Jason Blundell took over, all of the COD Zombies characters were played off mostly for laughs. This includes the Victis crew. All four of these characters aren't taken too seriously, and they're just here to get a laugh out of you. I get this is the intent of the Victis section, however the whole point of this video is to play around with ideas that can make these characters and their journey much more memorable and interesting. So let's pretend we're the writers of the COD Zombie storyline, and we decide for the Victis group, we're going for a mature story with comedic undertones instead of a comedic story with mature undertones, which makes up most of the post-origin story. Well, where would we start? Well, you know how all these characters have pretty interesting and or fascinating backgrounds, but none of these experiences shape these characters' personalities? Well, what if they did? Take Misty for example. Misty has one of the most ambiguous backgrounds of any COD Zombies character, especially one who's been featured in more than one map. However, from what we've gathered, we know she's a cowgirl who is raised on a beautiful farm that she can no longer go back to. So, let's go somewhere with that. What if the whole reason Misty is tagging along on this wacky adventure is to save her home? Give her something to fight for, some motivation, something. What about the other characters? Russman was a broken arrow worker who lost his memory due to excessive exposure to element 115, which leads to him ending up homeless. What if he tags along this adventure because Maxis manipulates him by telling him he'll get answers to his past if he aids him in a power struggle against Victis? But along the adventure, Russman vaguely recalls things he saw his time at Broken Arrow. That way, Russman can give the player some brief insight as to what they're fighting against without flat out ruining the mystery. Boom! Russman has motivation and a cool gimmick to the story. See, make these characters interesting, make them mean something. There can be other ideas, like Stillinger starting off as a sane man who slowly goes crazy as a result of Victis constantly speaking to him, which would be such a cool nod to Victis' origin of going insane. Or give Martin an arc, or like basically he graduates from cowering in a bunker to becoming a fully confident zombie slayer. I get it. These characters are just pawns being used as puppets by greater forces in the story, but that doesn't mean giving them some humanity would harm their purpose to the story. In fact, it would actually be a cool decision if handled right. Imagine if you were actually hooked on these characters and you actually wanted to see them succeed, only for all of your investment and all of these characters fighting to be pointless since they're too small to fit into this intergalactic battle. What if instead of looking down at these characters as pawns, you actually were the pawn, and all of your hard work to give these characters the happy ending they rightfully deserve were futile in the end? Now technically this is how things are when you're doing Easter eggs as these guys, but you're not invested in these characters. You don't root for them to get what they want. You just want to get the Easter egg done just for the sake of getting it done, so when something goes wrong for these characters in the end, it's not a no! It's more of a meh, well that happened. What I'm trying to say is that if these characters were made more human, the player would be much more invested in their journey. So that's how the Victis story was wasted character-wise. Now we're getting into part 2. The lore. Now, I am not going to sit here and tell you that the Victis story didn't expand on anything because it certainly did in many aspects. However, after Transit, things stopped getting interesting. In Die Rise, we barely get any new information, and in Buried, aside from the ending, there is no new information to expand the story. I think Victis' story not only not focusing on expansion to the lore is such a weird decision, because this is the only segment in the entire 11-year story where the world is actually suffering from a full-scale apocalypse. And all of the maps before and after Victis, they're just isolated events, but during Victis, it's literally the end of humanity. We should be learning about what the heck is the military doing at this time, if there even is a military. What was the initial outbreak that followed the destruction of Earth like for survivors? What if there were factions of survivors who battled each other to serve either Maxis or Richthofen? We learned that Sturmsure was a part of a group called The Flesh who ate zombies to survive. Cool, that's interesting, tell me more. For the first and only time during the storyline, I want to know more about what's happening with normal society as opposed to all the Ether, Maxis, Richtofen stuff. But even if they focus on other things, at least they're expanding the universe. However, nothing is barely ever learned in the story. Everything feels so isolated and uneventful. And that's the best way to describe the Victis section of the story. Uneventful. None of the characters are particularly interesting or layered, and nothing is ever expanded really. However, this story definitely had the potential to be something more. All of these characters have such interesting backgrounds that could help shape them as people and give them motives, but all of these characters are so bland and would probably be forgotten about if they weren't the main stars of Black Ops 2 Zombies. And the story was bleak, boring, and had a few interesting concepts such as the Civil War and Transit's Broken Arrow facility and Sturmsure's old group, The Flesh. However, like I said, that's not enough to make this era of the storyline stand out in any way. Victis has the foundation to be something so amazing, but it's held back by the limit Treyarch set themselves when it came to mature storytelling. And listen, I'm not saying Treyarch shouldn't have gone a different route. The Victis story was obviously meant to be something like nothing but a mildly interesting story to give an excuse for these characters to go to certain locations to do certain things. But I wanted to highlight the massive potential the story could have had if handled more maturely. But what about you guys? Will you make any changes to the Victis story, or do you think it's fine the way it is?